My name is Bette Thompson, 73 years old, with more wrinkles than I care to count. I thought having my gallbladder removed would be routine. Instead, I woke to a young doctor's concerned face hovering above mine. "I'm sorry. I didn't know he hadn't told you," she whispered, closing the privacy curtain. Told what my mouth felt desert dry. She glanced nervously at the door. "Your son approved a second surgery." Her voice dropped even lower. "One you never consented to." Before continuing, where are you watching from today? Drop a like and subscribe if medical betrayals make your blood boil. For 15 years since my Frank passed away, I've lived independently in our suburban Minneapolis home. The same home where we raised our children, planted gardens, and built a life. Frank always said independence was the most precious thing a person could have. "Once you give it up, Betty," he would warn you, never get it back the same way. Those words would echo in my mind more than I ever expected. My son Jackson is 50 years old now, married to Diane for nearly 20 years. They live just 20 minutes away, which has been both a blessing and, well, sometimes a challenge. Jackson inherited his father's strong personality, that decisive confidence that borders on stubbornness. Diane matches him in determination, though she hides it better behind concerned smiles and gentle suggestions. They mean well, I know that. But their version of caring has felt increasingly like controlling over the past few years. "Mom, did you take your blood pressure medication today?" Jackson would ask before I could even say hello on our weekly calls. "Have you thought more about that senior living community we toured?" Diane would slip into conversation while helping me unload groceries. I cherished their concern while firmly maintaining my boundaries. My garden kept me active, my book club kept my mind engaged, and I drove myself everywhere I needed to go. I managed my own finances, kept my house spotless, and volunteered twice weekly at the community center. Independence wasn't just a preference for me, it was central to my identity. The gallbladder attacks started last winter. The first one sent me to the emergency room at 3 a.m, pain radiating through my abdomen like nothing I'd experienced since childbirth. The doctor explained gallstones were common, especially for a woman of your age, a phrase I've grown to detest. He recommended monitoring the situation, dietary changes, and possibly surgery if attacks continued. They did continue, each one more severe than the last. By spring, I reluctantly scheduled the surgery. My first major medical procedure since Frank died. I was nervous, but resolved. The surgery was necessary, and I'd recover quickly, according to Dr. Hoffman, my regular physician for 12 years. Jackson immediately positioned himself as my medical advocate. "Mom, you need someone to make decisions if something goes wrong," he insisted over dinner one evening. "Let me be your medical proxy." I hesitated. "I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions, Jackson." "What if you're under anesthesia, and doctors need immediate answers?" His tone was reasonable, concerned. "It's just for emergencies." Reluctantly, I agreed. The likelihood of anything complicated happening during a routine gallbladder removal seemed remote, and he was right that someone should be listed just in case. The day before surgery, Jackson drove me to the hospital for pre-admission procedures. The nurse handed me clipboard after clipboard of forms: consent forms, insurance forms, advance directive forms. Jackson stood so close I could smell his aftershave as I signed. "Do you want me to read through these for you, Mom?" he offered, hand extended. "My eyes work just fine," I replied, perhaps more sharply than necessary. Something about his hovering made me uneasy. That afternoon, while the hospital staff took me through orientation, explaining what would happen during surgery, Jackson stepped out twice for phone calls. Each time he returned looking slightly tense, checking his watch frequently. That evening at home, he insisted on staying over in my guest room. "So I can drive you in the morning," he explained reasonably. After I went to bed, I got up for water and overheard him in the kitchen speaking in hushed tones. "Yes, the procedure is scheduled right after the gallbladder removal." "No, she doesn't know. It's for her own good." The doctor agreed it's preventative. I froze in the hallway, heart suddenly racing. What procedure? What wasn't I being told? I almost confronted him then, but told myself I must have misunderstood. Jackson wouldn't hide something medical from me. Would he? Sleep evaded me that night. I tossed between uncomfortable positions, my mind alternating between surgery, anxiety, and that troubling conversation fragment. By morning, I'd convinced myself I'd misheard. Jackson seemed so normal, so concerned about my comfort as he helped me into the car. At the hospital, while a nurse took my vitals, Jackson excused himself to speak with someone at the nurse's station. I watched through the doorway as he nodded seriously, signed something, and shook hands with a doctor I didn't recognize. Not Dr. Hoffman, who should have been performing my surgery. Not anyone I'd met during previous appointments. Jackson, I called when he returned. Who was that? Just confirming your procedure details, he said smoothly. Everything's all set. Before I could probe further, an anesthesiologist entered to explain the sedation process. Soon after they wheeled me toward the operating room, Jackson squeezed my hand, saying, "This is for the best, Mom. You'll see." His choice of words struck me as odd, but the medication was already making me drowsy. My last conscious thought before darkness claimed me was a vague uneasiness that something wasn't right. Consciousness returned gradually, like swimming up through layers of murky water. Hospital sounds penetrated, first beeping monitors, distant voices, squeaking cartwheels. Then came the pain, sharper and more widespread than I'd expected. It radiated across my abdomen, not just concentrated where my gallbladder had been. I blinked against harsh fluorescent lights, trying to orient myself. A young woman in a white coat noticed I was awake and approached my bedside. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and compassionate eyes studied me above her surgical mask. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Dr. Warren. How are you feeling?" I tried to speak, but my throat felt scraped raw from the breathing tube. She offered ice chips, which I gratefully accepted. "The gallbladder removal went smoothly," she continued. "Both procedures were successful, though you might experience more discomfort than expected from just the cholecystectomy alone." "Both procedures," I frowned, trying to process her words through lingering anesthesia fog. "Your recovery will take a bit longer than initially discussed," Dr. Warren explained, checking my IV line. "But considering both surgeries, your vitals are excellent." "Both," I managed to croak. Dr. Warren's expression shifted, brows drawing together in concern. "Yes, both the gallbladder removal and the partial hysterectomy." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Partial hysterectomy. I shook my head weakly, certain I'd misheard. Dr. Warren's eyes widened slightly. She glanced at my chart, then back at me. "Mrs. Thompson, weren't you informed about the second procedure?" "No," I whispered. "Just gallbladder." A flicker of alarm crossed her face. She checked my wristband, then the chart again. "Your son approved the additional surgery this morning. He said it was discussed with you." Never discussed, I managed my heart rate increasing enough to trigger a warning beep from the monitor. Dr. Warren immediately looked toward the doorway, then pulled the privacy curtain around my bed. "I'm sorry. I didn't know he hadn't told you," she whispered, her professional composure momentarily fractured. Told what my mouth felt desert dry, despite the ice chips. She glanced nervously at the door. "Your son approved a second surgery." Her voice dropped even lower. "One you never consented to." The implications crashed over me like a wave. Someone had operated on my body without my knowledge or permission. And my own son had authorized it. "Show me," I demanded, struggling to sit up despite the pain. Dr. Warren gently helped adjust my position, then reluctantly showed me my chart. There it was in black and white. Procedure 1, laparoscopic cholecystectomy gallbladder removal. Procedure 2, partial hysterectomy. Both authorization forms bore Jackson's signature as my medical proxy. "This isn't right," I said, voice stronger now, despite the burning in my throat. "I never agreed to this. I want to see the hospital administrator." Dr. Warren nodded seriously. "You have every right to be upset, Mrs. Thompson. This represents a serious breach of informed consent. I'll notify administration immediately and request your complete medical records for your review." As she stepped away, memories flashed through my mind. Jackson questioning my medication management, suggesting senior living facilities, commenting on my forgetfulness when I misplaced my reading glasses. Small moments that seemed like normal concern but suddenly formed a disturbing pattern. A nurse named Sandra came in shortly after, her kind face creased with concern. "Dr. Warren asked me to check on you. I'm so sorry about what's happened." "Why would they do this?" I asked, tears threatening for the first time. "Why would my son?" Sandra adjusted my blankets with practiced efficiency. "I can't speak to motives, but as a patient, you have rights that appear to have been violated. A partial hysterectomy at your age without medical necessity or your consent raises serious ethical and legal questions." Medical necessity, I echoed. Dr. Warren noted in your chart that while the procedure was technically successful, she found no pathology that would have necessitated the surgery, no concerning tissue, no signs of disease. This information landed like another blow. Not only unauthorized but unnecessary surgery. I asked Sandra to help me make a phone call. Not to Jackson, I couldn't face him yet, but to my friend Dorothy, a retired nurse who lived nearby. Dorothy had been my rock since Frank died, the one person who never treated me as diminished by age. Dorothy arrived within the hour, her normally pleasant expression replaced by fierce determination. After hearing what happened, she immediately began asking technical questions about the procedures, documentation, and hospital protocols. "This is unconscionable," she declared after reviewing my chart. "A clear violation of patient autonomy and possibly elder abuse." The hospital administration initially responded with practiced neutrality. "We'll need to investigate the circumstances," said the risk management director who visited my room that afternoon. "Perhaps there was a miscommunication." "There was no miscommunication," I insisted, Dorothy's solid presence beside me bolstering my courage. "I consented to gallbladder surgery only. Nothing else was ever discussed with me." After the administrators left, my phone rang. Jackson. With shaking hands, I answered and put it on speaker so Dorothy could hear. "Mom, how are you feeling?" They said the surgery went well. "Which surgery, Jackson?" My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, cold and hard. A pause. "What do you mean?" "I know about the hysterectomy you authorized without my knowledge." Another longer pause. "Mom, we discussed this. You agreed it was a good preventative measure considering your family history." "That's a lie," I said clearly. "We never discussed any such thing." "You must be confused from the anesthesia," he replied, his tone shifting to one I recognized, the voice he used when explaining things to children or the elderly. "Remember, Dr. Peterson recommended it after your last checkup." "I've never met a Dr. Peterson," I said. "Jackson, why are you doing this?" "Mom, I'm trying to protect you. Make things easier for you as you age. You've been so forgetful lately." Dorothy squeezed my hand in silent support as tears slid down my cheeks. The physical pain from surgery was nothing compared to this emotional betrayal. "I'm not coming home with you tomorrow," I told him. "Dorothy will pick me up." "That's not the plan," Jackson protested, voice hardening. "We've prepared the guest room at our house for your recovery." "Plans have changed," I replied before ending the call. That night was the longest of my life. Physical pain kept me from finding comfortable positions, while emotional pain kept my mind spinning with questions. Why would Jackson do this? What did he hope to gain by putting me through unnecessary surgery? The betrayal cut deeper than any surgical incision. Morning brought a meeting with a hospital patient advocate who explained my rights and the potential legal implications of what had occurred. "Mrs. Thompson, you have grounds for serious complaints against both the hospital and potentially your son," she explained. "Performing surgery without proper consent is a grave ethical breach and possibly grounds for legal action." As I prepared for discharge, one thought sustained me. This wasn't over. Whatever game Jackson was playing, I wouldn't be a passive participant anymore. Dorothy's spare bedroom became my sanctuary for the first week of recovery. Her single-story home accommodated my limited mobility, and her nursing background meant expert care for my surgical sites. Most importantly, her presence shielded me from immediate confrontation with Jackson, who called multiple times daily. "He's left 3 messages this morning," Dorothy reported, bringing me tea and medication. "Diane called twice yesterday. They're insisting you need to be at their house." "I'm not ready to face them," I admitted. The physical pain was improving daily, but the emotional wound remained raw and pulsing. "You'll need to eventually," Dorothy said gently, "if only to understand why." She was right, of course. The question consumed me. Why would my son authorize unnecessary surgery without my knowledge? What possible motivation could justify such a violation? 6 days after surgery, Jackson and Diane showed up unannounced at Dorothy's door. I was resting in the living room when I heard their voices in the entryway. "She's our family, Dorothy. We appreciate your help, but we're here to take her home now." Jackson's voice carried that familiar, authoritative tone he'd perfected in his banking career. "That's not your decision to make," Dorothy replied firmly. "Bette has made her wishes clear." Mom, Jackson appeared in the doorway, Diane hovering anxiously behind him. We've come to take you home. You shouldn't be imposing on Dorothy like this." I straightened in my chair, wincing slightly at the pull of stitches. "I'm not imposing. I'm exactly where I want to be." "You're not thinking clearly," he insisted, entering the room fully. "The anesthesia, the pain medication, the trauma of surgery, you need family support right now." "What I need," I said carefully, "is an explanation. Why did you authorize a hysterectomy I never consented to? A procedure that, according to the surgeon, wasn't even medically necessary." Jackson glanced at Diane, some unspoken communication passing between them. "Mom, we've been over this. It was preventative. Given Aunt Carol's uterine cancer—" "Carol had breast cancer, not uterine," I interrupted. "And she was my husband's sister, not blood-related to me at all." His expression flickered, momentarily disconcerted. "Well, your mother then died of heart failure at 89. My voice remained steady despite the anger building inside me. "Jackson, stop lying. There was no medical reason for that surgery." "So why?" Diane stepped forward, placing a hand on Jackson's arm. "We only want what's best for you, Bette. As you get older, difficult decisions need to be made. Sometimes children have to step in when parents can't make the right choices." "The right choices?" I echoed incredulously. "You think authorizing unnecessary surgery without my knowledge was the right choice?" "It simplifies things," Jackson said, his composure slipping slightly. "Preventative measures avoid complications later." The doctor agreed it made sense. "Which doctor?" "Not my regular physician. Not the surgeon who actually performed the procedure and found nothing wrong." Jackson's face hardened. "You're being difficult, Mom. This is exactly why we needed to step in. Your judgment isn't what it used to be." And suddenly, with stunning clarity, I understood. This isn't about my health at all, is it? This is about declaring me incompetent. The brief flash of alarm in his eyes confirmed my suspicion before he could mask it. "That's ridiculous," he scoffed, but the denial came too quickly. "Is it you've been positioning yourself to take control of my life? The constant questions about my medication suggesting senior living, commenting on normal moments of forgetfulness as if they're signs of dementia." "We're concerned about you living alone," Diane interjected smoothly. Are you concerned about my house, my savings, the pieces were falling into place with sickening speed? Last month you asked about adding your name to my deed, just in case. You brought those financial documents for me to sign without explaining them fully." "That was estate planning," Jackson said dismissively. "Standard procedure at your age. Funny, when I called my bank afterward, they said those papers would have given you power of attorney, not just the limited financial oversight you claimed." Diane shifted uncomfortably, exchanging another glance with Jackson. Then she made a critical mistake. "The renovations would have taken months anyway," she said. "We weren't planning to move you out immediately." "Renovations," I repeated. "What renovations?" Diane's eyes widened as she realized her slip. Jackson shot her a warning look. "The upgrades we discussed for your bathroom," he said smoothly. "The walk-in shower, remember?" But I never forgot important conversations, and we'd never discussed bathroom renovations. The truth hit me with breathtaking force. "You're planning to sell my house," I stated. "That's why you've been bringing up senior living communities. That's why you needed me declared incompetent." "That's absurd," Jackson protested, but his face had flushed dark red. "Is it Diane just mentioned renovations I know nothing about? You've been consulting with an elder law attorney. Yes, I know about that too. Marjorie Simmons from book club saw you at Thomas Klein's office last month." Dorothy, who had been silently witnessing this exchange, spoke up. "I think you should be honest with your mother, Jackson. Whatever's going on, she deserves the truth." Jackson's careful facade finally cracked. "Fine. Yes, we've been planning for your future. Someone has to. You refuse to acknowledge you're getting older, that you can't manage alone forever. So you authorized unnecessary surgery. How does that help me?" "Medical decisions," Diane said quietly. "Evidence of decision-making capacity." The pieces locked into final, horrible place. "You needed examples of my inability to make proper healthcare decisions," I realized aloud. "So you created one by going behind my back, by violating my body without consent." Jackson's expression confirmed everything. "It's for your own good, Mom. The house is too much for you. The stairs, the maintenance, the yard work. My garden keeps me active, I countered. My home keeps me independent. Independence isn't everything, he argued. Safety matters more at your age. And my inheritance matters to you, apparently. I said the words like ash in my mouth. Is that what this is really about? You need money. His silence was damning. The investment, Diane whispered, touching his arm. Just tell her. The final truth emerged in painful fragments. Jackson had made a disastrous investment, leveraging himself deeply. He stood to lose everything, including their house, if he couldn't cover his position soon. My home, fully paid off, and in an increasingly valuable neighborhood, represented the solution to his financial crisis. You would steal my home, my independence, even my bodily autonomy, for money. My voice broke on the last word. Not steal, he protested. Protect. You'd be comfortable in assisted living. We'd make sure of it. While you renovate and flip my house for profit. It makes financial sense for everyone, he insisted. The money would last longer in a managed account than with you making decisions alone. Dorothy had heard enough. I think you both need to leave, she said firmly. Bet isn't going anywhere with you today or any day unless she chooses to. You can't keep my mother from me, Jackson threatened. Watch me, Dorothy replied, years of nursing authority in her voice. Leave now or I call the police and report elder abuse. Your choice. After they left, I collapsed into tears. Dorothy held me while I sobbed, the pain of betrayal far exceeding my surgical discomfort. My own son, I kept repeating. My own son did this to me. Later that evening, the phone rang again. Not Jackson this time, but my daughter Marissa calling from Seattle. Unlike Jackson, who had stayed close, Marissa had built her life 3,000 miles away, calling regularly but visiting only once or twice a year. Mom, what's going on? Jackson just called me ranting about Dorothy kidnapping you or something crazy. I told her everything. The unauthorized surgery, the competency, the financial motivation behind it all. I'm coming, she said immediately. I'll be on the first flight tomorrow. Don't worry about anything. We'll figure this out together. After we hung up, I used Dorothy's laptop to check my financial accounts, something I did regularly despite Jackson's insistence on helping me. To my horror, I discovered monitoring services had been added to all my accounts, services that would send notifications to an email address I didn't recognize whenever transactions occurred. Dorothy helped me change all my passwords and remove the monitoring. Then, using her printer, we copied the documentation showing who had added those services and when. The final revelation came that evening when Dorothy's daughter, a computer specialist, helped us access my rarely used email account. They're buried in a folder Jackson had created months ago, when helping me with computer issues was a draft of guardianship paperwork with my electronic signature, a signature I had never provided. The depth of the betrayal was staggering. This wasn't an impulsive decision, but a calculated months-long strategy to take control of my life, my home, and my finances, starting with control of my body through unauthorized surgery. That night, lying in Dorothy's guest bed, I made a promise to myself. This violation would not stand. My son had made a grave miscalculation. He thought age had weakened me, that I would submit meekly to his authority. He was about to learn how very wrong he was. The week following the confrontation became a turning point. While my body slowly healed from the dual surgeries, my resolve crystallized into determination. Dorothy's guest room transformed into command central as we began methodically planning my response. First things first, Dorothy said on day 8 of my recovery. You need legal representation specializing in elder rights. Through her church connections, Dorothy arranged a meeting with Amanda Torres, an elder law attorney known for her fierce advocacy of senior autonomy. Amanda arrived at Dorothy's home carrying a leather portfolio and an air of calm competence. Mrs. Thompson, she said, taking my hand warmly, I'm so sorry for what you've experienced. What was done to you represents multiple violations, ethical, legal, and deeply personal. I appreciated her directness. Can anything be done? Absolutely, she confirmed, opening her portfolio. We'll approach this on several fronts simultaneously. First, we need to establish your clear competence with updated medical and cognitive evaluations. You think Jackson will claim I'm incompetent? Based on what you've told me, that appears to be his strategy. We need to preemptively address it with solid documentation of your decision-making capacity. Amanda outlined a comprehensive approach: medical evaluations, legal filings, to block any guardianship attempts, formal complaints against the hospital for consent violations, and potentially restraining orders against Jackson. "This will be difficult," she warned. "Family conflicts over elder care and assets often are. But you have something valuable on your side." "What's that?" "The truth," she said simply, "and medical documentation of an unnecessary procedure performed without consent. That's powerful evidence of exploitation, not protection." The next day, I underwent comprehensive cognitive testing with a geriatric specialist recommended by Amanda. Dr. Levine conducted thorough evaluations of my memory, reasoning, judgment, and decision-making capacity. "Mrs. Thompson," he concluded after 2 hours of assessment, "your cognitive function is excellent for any age. There are 0 clinical indications for any form of guardianship or supervised living." His official report would become a cornerstone of our legal strategy. Meanwhile, Dr. Warren from the hospital had reached out. Troubled by her unwitting role in the unauthorized procedure, she requested a meeting. "I performed the surgery your son authorized," she explained in Dorothy's living room medical files spread between us. "I want you to know that while the procedure itself was successful, I found no medical justification for it. Nothing in your surgical pathology indicated any necessity for the procedure." "Would you be willing to document that formally?" Amanda asked. "I already have," Dr. Warren replied, sliding forward an affidavit. "I've also filed an ethics complaint within the hospital system regarding the consent process. Mrs. Thompson, what happened to you should never have occurred." Her support represented a crucial medical perspective backing our position. Marissa arrived from Seattle the following day, bringing fresh energy and technological savvy to our efforts. While her relationship with Jackson had always been strained, competitive siblings with different approaches to life, the current situation left her stunned. "I knew he could be controlling," she said as we sorted through financial documents at Dorothy's dining table. "But this authorizing surgery without consent, it's criminal." Through careful investigation of my financial records, Marissa uncovered the likely motivation behind Jackson's urgency. His investment disaster was worse than initially suggested. He had leveraged himself significantly, using his own home as collateral for high-risk ventures that had collapsed dramatically. According to timestamps on emails we recovered, he began planning the guardianship strategy within days of receiving margin calls from his broker. "Your house would solve everything for him," Marissa explained. "Selling it in this market would clear his debts and still leave enough to place you in a facility while claiming he's acting in your best interest." The betrayal still stung sharply, but understanding its roots helped me process my grief. This wasn't about my care, it was about financial desperation driving my son to unconscionable actions. 2 weeks after surgery, we connected with a senior rights advocacy group that provided both emotional support and practical guidance. Their weekly meetings introduced me to others who had faced similar family conflicts, though few as extreme as unauthorized surgery. "Financial elder abuse is increasingly common," explained Grace Hendricks, the group's founder. "But your case represents a particularly severe violation. Your story could help others recognize warning signs before situations escalate." With this growing network of support, we developed a 3-part strategy: legal action to protect my autonomy and assets, medical documentation of the unnecessary procedure, and my full competence and personal steps to reclaim my daughter's independence. Amanda filed the first legal motions: a temporary restraining order against Jackson, revocation of his medical proxy status, and formal complaints against both the hospital and the surgeon who had performed the unauthorized procedure based on Jackson's misrepresentation. "The TRO hearing is scheduled for next Wednesday," Amanda informed us. "Jackson will be served papers tomorrow. Be prepared for potential backlash." It came swiftly. Jackson began calling family members, family friends, even my book club acquaintances, claiming I had become paranoid and delusional after surgery, that I was being manipulated by Dorothy and Marissa. He told Aunt Judith. "You're having a mental breakdown," Marissa reported after one particularly upsetting call. "He's trying to build his narrative that you're incompetent." "Then we counter with facts," I said firmly. My initial shock and grief had transformed into resolute determination. "We have medical evaluations, financial records, and documentation of his unauthorized actions." By the third week of recovery, I felt strong enough to return to my own home, though not without precautions. Marissa arranged for a security system installation. Dorothy organized a schedule where different friends would stay with me initially. My book club, outraged by Jackson's actions, created a rotation for grocery delivery and transportation to appointments. The day I walked back into my own home represented a personal victory. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it the morning of surgery, yet everything had changed. I ran my hand along the familiar kitchen counter, looked out at my flourishing garden, and felt a surge of gratitude mixed with determination. This was my space, my sanctuary. No one had the right to take it from me, especially not under the guise of protection. That evening, sitting in my favorite chair with Marissa nearby, I articulated the fear I'd been holding inside. What if I do become truly unable to care for myself someday? Marissa set aside her laptop. Then we'll face it honestly together. We'll explore options that preserve your dignity and respect your wishes. But Mom, that day isn't today. You're fully capable, and what Jackson did wasn't about your welfare. I know I said softly, but I'm afraid now, afraid of vulnerability. That's why we're putting legal protections in place, she reminded me, so that even if your capacity does change someday, your wishes remain paramount. That night in my own bed, despite lingering surgical discomfort, I slept more peacefully than I had since before the operation. Whatever came next, I would face it on my terms in my home, surrounded by genuine support. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since waking to Dr. Warren's concerned face, I felt something crucial returning my power. The temporary restraining order hearing marked my first public stand against Jackson's machinations. Dressed in a navy blue suit that hung slightly loose on my still recovering frame, I entered the courthouse with Amanda Torres beside me and a determined set to my jaw. Jackson and his attorney waited on the opposite side of the courtroom. He attempted to approach me before proceedings began, but Amanda stepped smoothly between us. My client has nothing to say to Mr. Thompson outside of these formal proceedings, she informed his lawyer crisply. Judge Helen Moreno reviewed the evidence with careful attention, my medical records showing unauthorized surgery, Dr. Warren's affidavit stating the procedure had no medical justification documentation of Jackson's attempts to monitor my finances and the draft guardianship papers we'd discovered. The court finds sufficient evidence to grant the temporary injunction, Judge Moreno ruled. Mr. Thompson is ordered to have no contact with Mrs. Thompson either directly or through third parties. He is prohibited from accessing any of her financial accounts, medical records, or attempting to make decisions on her behalf in any capacity. Jackson's face flushed dark red as the judge continued. Furthermore, all previous legal authorizations granted to Mr. Thompson, including medical proxy designation, are hereby suspended pending full hearing. This court takes allegations of elder exploitation extremely seriously. Outside the courthouse, several members of my book club had gathered in support. Martha Jenkins, our unofficial leader at 80 years young, embraced me carefully. We're all behind you, Bet, she assured me. Jackson called several of us spinning tales about your mental state. Not a single person believed him. Their practical support proved invaluable in the weeks that followed. Different members drove me to appointments, brought prepared meals, or simply visited to keep me company. When physical therapy for my surgical recovery began, Judith Anderson coordinated a transportation schedule among the group. This is what community means, she told me during one drive to the rehabilitation center, standing together when one of us is wronged. Not everyone responded supportively. Jackson's campaign to discredit me reached extended family members, many of whom found themselves caught in an uncomfortable position. Your cousin Richard called Marissa, reported one evening. Jackson told him you're suffering from paranoid delusions. I set him straight with the medical reports. The local senior center director, Luis Ramirez, reached out after hearing about my situation through community channels. Mrs. Thompson, we've unfortunately seen variations of this scenario before. We have resources that might help. Through Luis, I connected with additional advocacy groups and legal resources specializing in elder autonomy. He arranged for a home safety evaluation that recommended minor modifications to support aging-in-place practical changes that honored independence rather than removing it. 3 weeks after surgery, my follow-up appointment confirmed excellent physical recovery despite the unnecessary additional procedure. "You're healing remarkably well," Dr. Warren noted, "both physically and it appears emotionally." "I'm focused on action rather than anger," I explained. "It gives me purpose." The legal process intensified when Jackson's attorney requested my deposition. Amanda prepared me thoroughly, emphasizing the importance of calm, factual responses, regardless of provocative questions. "They'll try to portray you as confused, vindictive, or influenced by others," she warned. "Your job is to remain composed and clear." The deposition lasted 4 grueling hours. Jackson's attorney, Harold Winters, attempted repeatedly to elicit contradictory statements or signs of confusion. "Mrs. Thompson, isn't it true you initially agreed to consider assisted living options last Christmas?" he asked with calculated casualness. "No," I replied firmly. "I listened to a presentation to appease my son, but explicitly stated my preference to remain in my home." "And you never discussed the possibility of additional preventative procedures during your surgery?" "Never," I stated unequivocally. No medical professional ever suggested such a procedure was warranted, nor did I consent to anything beyond gallbladder removal. By the end, even Mr. Winters appeared frustrated by his inability to shake my testimony or portray me as anything other than lucid and rational. "You did beautifully," Amanda assured me afterward. "Your clarity and consistency speak volumes." Our case gained unexpected attention when a reporter from the local paper contacted Amanda about doing a story on elder rights. "She heard about your situation through courthouse sources," Amanda explained. "This could help raise awareness about elder autonomy issues." After careful consideration, I agreed to an interview focused on the broader issues rather than personal accusations. The resulting article, "Seniors Fight for Autonomy When Protection Becomes Control," featured my experience as its central example while maintaining appropriate journalistic distance regarding ongoing legal matters. The publicity generated both support and scrutiny. The hospital, now facing serious questions about its consent procedures, reached out through their legal department. "They want to discuss resolution options," Amanda informed me. "Your case has prompted an internal review of their proxy consent protocols." Meanwhile, Dorothy organized a neighborhood watch of sorts, with friends taking note of any unusual activity around my home after Jackson was spotted driving slowly past one evening despite the restraining order. 5 weeks after surgery, Diane contacted me directly, her first independent communication since the confrontation. "Bet, I need to see you," she said when I answered her call. "Without Jackson, please." Against Marissa's objections, but with Amanda's cautious approval, I agreed to meet Diane at a public cafe near Dorothy's house. Dorothy accompanied me but sat at a separate table, watchful but giving us privacy. Diane looked haggard, dark circles prominent beneath her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I know that doesn't begin to cover it, but I am deeply, truly sorry." For which part I asked, neither accepting nor rejecting her apology yet. "All of it. The surgery, the lies, the manipulation." She twisted her wedding ring anxiously. "I went along with Jackson's plans because our financial situation is dire, but I never thought." She paused, composing herself. "I never thought he would authorize surgery without your knowledge. That crossed a line I can't ignore." She revealed that Jackson's financial desperation had led to increasingly alarming behaviors. The investment failure had been catastrophic, threatening not just their lifestyle but potentially their freedom if certain accounting irregularities came to light. "It doesn't excuse anything," she emphasized, "but I want you to know I've given your attorney documentation of the planning that went into this. Emails, notes from meetings with that horrible doctor who agreed to the unnecessary procedure, everything. Her cooperation would strengthen our case significantly, though it didn't erase the betrayal." "What happens now between you and Jackson?" I asked. "I've moved out," she said simply. "Some lines can't be uncrossed." The following week brought another significant development when Marissa discovered additional evidence while sorting through old emails I'd given her access to. Jackson had attempted similar financial maneuvers with my accounts 2 years earlier, but had been thwarted by bank security measures. This wasn't a desperate one-time decision, Marissa concluded. This was a pattern of behavior that escalated over time. The evidence painted a disturbing picture of long-term planning rather than a situational ethical lapse. As legal proceedings advanced, the Hospital Ethics Committee completed their investigation, issuing a formal apology and implementing new verification protocols for proxy-authorized procedures. Any additional surgery not covered in original patient consent forms will now require recorded verbal confirmation with the patient when possible, or secondary verification from another family member when not, Amanda explained after reviewing their new policies. Your case has already created institutional change. In a moment of profound significance, I met with my attorney to revise my will and advance directives. Jackson, once my trusted medical proxy and primary beneficiary, would no longer have any role in my care decisions. Instead, I designated Marissa as my healthcare agent with Dorothy, as backup with explicit written instructions regarding my wishes. This is difficult, I acknowledged as I signed the documents. He's still my son, despite everything. Boundaries can be an act of love, too, Amanda observed gently, both for yourself and for him. The judge's interim ruling in our case arrived 6 weeks after surgery. Judge Moreno's language left no ambiguity about her position. The court finds compelling evidence that Mr. Thompson's actions regarding Mrs. Thompson's medical care represented a serious breach of trust and potentially criminal violation of patient rights. The temporary orders will remain in effect until final resolution of this matter. Furthermore, the court strongly affirms Mrs. Thompson's demonstrated capacity to manage her own affairs and medical decisions. These words, formal and unequivocal, validated what I had known all along. I remained capable, competent, and entitled to autonomy regardless of my age. That evening, inspired by my case and others like it, the Senior Center hosted a community seminar on elder rights. I attended with Dorothy and Marissa, listening as legal experts, medical professionals, and advocates discussed the balance between support and control in aging. Later, working in my garden as physical therapy for my healing body, I reflected on growth and resilience. Some plants thrived after pruning, coming back stronger once diseased portions were removed. Perhaps relationships could follow the same pattern, painful cutting away, creating space for healthier growth. The thought provided small comfort as I faced the final confrontation that would determine whether my relationship with Jackson could ever be replanted or if that particular garden bed would remain permanently fallow. The final hearing arrived exactly 2 months after my surgery. The courtroom felt more crowded than during preliminary proceedings, with several members of my support network present. Dr. Krausend, 264. Warren sat near the front, having agreed to testify about the medical aspects of the case. Diane occupied a seat near the back, separate from Jackson and his attorney. Judge Moreno called the court to order, her gaze sweeping over the assembled parties with measured neutrality. Today we will hear final arguments and testimony regarding Thompson v. Thompson petition for permanent protective order and declaration of elder exploitation. Amanda presented our case, methodically building a comprehensive narrative supported by medical records, financial documentation, witness testimony, and my own clear account of events. Dr. Chu, Warren's testimony proved particularly powerful. As the surgeon who performed the partial hysterectomy, she stated firmly, "I can confirm there was no medical necessity for this procedure. Had Mrs. Thompson been consulted directly, I would have advised against it for someone of her age and medical history." Jackson's testimony came next, his attorney attempting to frame his actions as misguided but well-intentioned protection. "My client acknowledges communication failures," Mr. Winters argued smoothly. However, his actions were motivated by genuine concern for his mother's welfare as she ages. When Jackson took the stand, I studied his face. The face I'd loved since the moment the nurse placed him in my arms 50 years earlier. How had we arrived at this moment? "I was trying to simplify Mom's healthcare," he insisted. "Preventative procedures make sense when you consider potential complications of aging." "Yet you didn't discuss this preventative approach with your mother, Amanda," countered during cross-examination. "She wouldn't have understood the medical complexities," Jackson replied, his tone inadvertently condescending. Despite her demonstrated capacity to manage her own health care for decades, despite clear cognitive assessments confirming her decision-making ability, Jackson's composure began cracking under Amanda's persistent questioning. "You don't understand the pressure," he finally burst out, "the responsibility of caring for an aging parent while managing your own life." "Did Mrs. Thompson request your care?" Amanda asked calmly. "That's not how it works," he snapped. "She wouldn't admit needing help even if she did." "So, You decided to authorize unnecessary surgery without her knowledge, because you presumed to know better than both your mother and her medical providers. His response revealed the entitlement underlying his actions. I'm her son. I have a right to make these decisions if she can't. But she could, Amanda emphasized. By all objective measures, she remains fully capable of making her own medical decisions. The unexpected turning point came when a surprise witness was called Emily Jackson and Diane's 19-year-old daughter, my granddaughter. I hadn't seen Emily since before the surgery and felt a surge of emotion as she entered the courtroom looking both nervous and determined. I heard my parents discussing Grandma's surgery, Emily testified, avoiding her father's gaze. Dad specifically said they needed to act quickly before she changed her mind about the guardianship. When Mom mentioned that Grandma hadn't actually agreed to anything beyond gallbladder surgery, Dad said sometimes you have to make hard choices for people who can't see what's best. Her testimony visibly affected Judge Moreno, who asked several clarifying questions about the timing and context of these conversations. The judge's ruling came after a brief recess. This court finds clear and convincing evidence of attempted elder exploitation, she stated unequivocally. Mr. Thompson's actions represented not protection, but control, not assistance, but appropriation of Mrs. Thompson's autonomy. She granted the permanent protection order barring Jackson from making any financial, medical, or legal decisions on my behalf. Additionally, she ordered financial oversight of Jackson's accounts related to any of my assets and referred the unauthorized surgery matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal investigation. While this court recognizes the complexities of family relationships, Judge Moreno concluded it cannot condone violations of bodily autonomy and financial exploitation under the guise of familial care. In the courthouse hallway afterward, Jackson approached, despite the restraining order, Amanda quickly stepping between us. You've ruined everything, he said, his voice breaking. I was trying to help you. No, Jackson, I replied sadly. You were helping yourself. There's a difference. In the weeks that followed, consequences unfolded rapidly. The hospital offered a substantial settlement acknowledging their liability in performing the unauthorized procedure. The surgeon who had performed the surgery based on Jackson's misrepresentation faced disciplinary action from the medical board. Jackson, facing potential criminal charges and financial ruin, issued a public apology as part of a plea agreement with the district attorney's office. The carefully worded statement acknowledged serious errors in judgment and violation of patient autonomy rights, stopping short of full admission while accepting legal responsibility. Diane filed for divorce, unable to continue in a marriage she described as fundamentally compromised by deception. During a brief meeting at my home, she returned family photographs and heirlooms Jackson had taken from my house during my hospital stay, items I hadn't even realized were missing. I should have spoken up sooner, she said. I knew what he was doing wasn't right. We all make choices we regret, I replied, neither absolving nor condemning her. My recovery continued on multiple levels: physical healing from unnecessary surgery, emotional processing of profound betrayal, and practical reclaiming of my independence. The community recognition surprised me. A local senior advocacy organization presented me with their annual Courage Award, citing my willingness to fight publicly for elder autonomy. Your case has already changed hospital protocols, the organization's director noted during the small ceremony, and raised awareness about the fine line between support and control. Marissa extended her stay in Minneapolis, eventually confiding she was considering relocation. Seattle never really felt like home, she admitted. And recent events have made me realize the importance of healthy family relationships that island. My friendship with Dr. Warren evolved beyond our initial doctor-patient connection. Her ethical stand regarding my case had cost her professionally within certain hospital circles, but she remained committed to patient advocacy. Your situation changed how I practice medicine, she told me during a follow-up appointment that had become more social than medical. I now verify consent directly with patients, regardless of proxy documentation. The senior rights organization asked if I would consider sharing my story at their monthly meetings. Initially reluctant to revisit painful details, I eventually agreed after realizing how identification of warning signs might help others avoid similar situations. 6 months after surgery, Jackson completed court-mandated counseling and financial management classes. His attorney contacted Amanda about a potential supervised meeting. "You're under no obligation," Amanda reminded me. "The protection order remains in effect unless you choose to modify it." The decision weighed heavily. Despite everything, Jackson remained my son. The baby I had nursed, the child whose nightmares I had soothed, the young man I had celebrated at graduation. Could those memories coexist with the man who had violated my trust so completely? After considerable reflection, I agreed to a meeting with strict parameters: public location, Amanda present, specific time constraints. We met at a restaurant with private booths, Jackson arriving precisely on time, looking simultaneously familiar and like a stranger. "Thank you for seeing me," he began awkwardly. "I'm not sure yet whether it was the right decision," I replied honestly. Our conversation remained stilted, circling around surface topics before eventually addressing the essential question. "Can you ever forgive me?" he finally asked. I considered my answer carefully. "Forgiveness might be possible eventually," I said. "Trust is a separate matter. That would require sustained change, not just words." We established tentative boundaries: no unsupervised visits, no involvement in my medical or financial affairs, regular check-ins with Marissa regarding his behavior. The door remained slightly ajar, neither fully open nor permanently closed. Meanwhile, I focused on strengthening my independence while accepting appropriate assistance. Luis from the Senior Center helped implement modifications to my home: grab bars in strategic locations, improved lighting, a first-floor laundry conversion that supported aging in place without sacrificing autonomy. "Independence isn't about doing everything alone," he observed while installing a shower bench. "It's about maintaining control over your choices, including when and how to accept help." That perspective shift proved transformative in my recovery journey. I could accept Marissa's help with technology, Dorothy's companionship during medical appointments, and my book club's meal delivery during bad weather, all while maintaining essential decision-making authority over my life. The profound change in my identity surprised me most. From potential victim to empowered advocate, from betrayed mother to community resource, my experience had transformed me in unexpected ways. The violation intended to diminish me had instead revealed strength I hadn't known I possessed. 1 year after waking to Dr. Warren's concerned face in the recovery room, I hosted my book club in my living room, serving coffee in my favorite china cups. The physical scars had faded to thin lines, barely visible reminders of surgeries, both necessary and unauthorized. The emotional healing had progressed similarly, still present beneath the surface, but no longer dictating my daily experience. "You seem lighter," Martha observed as others chatted about the month's selection. "More yourself again." "I am," I agreed, glancing around my home. Still mine, still the sanctuary Frank and I had created together, but a different version of myself too. The year had brought profound changes. My relationship with Jackson had evolved into something I could never have imagined: structured, conditional, carefully bounded by legal parameters and emotional caution. We met monthly in public settings, sometimes with Marissa present. He remained barred from any involvement in my financial or medical decisions, a restriction he had finally stopped fighting. "I'm trying to understand who you actually are," I told him during our most recent meeting. "Not who I thought you were, or who I wanted you to be." "I'm trying to understand that too," he admitted, a moment of genuine self-reflection that offered a glimmer of hope. Diane's divorce had finalized their family home, sold to address Jackson's financial obligations. Emily, my granddaughter, had begun visiting me independently, rebuilding our relationship without her father's filtering presence. "Dad always made it seem like you needed constant help," she confided during one visit. "I never realized how capable you actually are." My involvement with the hospital ethics committee had become a central focus of my renewed purpose. Dr. Warren had nominated me for a patient representative position where my experience informed new consent protocols and family involvement guidelines. "Your case fundamentally changed our approach," the committee chair acknowledged during my first meeting. "We now recognize that age alone never justifies reduced patient autonomy." The support group for navigating family conflicts had evolved from a source of healing to a place where I offered guidance to others facing similar situations. Many cases involved subtler forms of control than unauthorized surgery, but the underlying dynamics remained consistent: the gradual erosion of autonomy under the guise of protection. The warning signs were there, I often told new members. I just didn't recognize them for what they were until it was almost too late. Legacy planning had taken on new significance, beyond financial considerations. I established a scholarship at the local community college for students pursuing careers in elder law or geriatric advocacy. The unexpected settlement from the hospital made this possible, transforming a traumatic experience into future positive impact. Marissa had indeed relocated, finding a position at a Minneapolis technology firm and purchasing a small house 15 minutes from mine. Our weekly dinners became anchoring points in my social calendar, our relationship deepening through crisis into genuine friendship beyond mother-daughter bonds. I never really knew you before, she reflected during one evening. I saw you as Mom, not as Bet, a person with your own identity and strength. Dorothy remained my closest friend, our connection, forged stronger through adversity. We're quite the pair of troublemakers, she joked during our weekly walks, now a ritual regardless of weather. Two old ladies who refused to go quietly into that good night. My garden flourished under renewed attention, the physical activity of tending it contributing to my continued recovery. I had pruned away diseased branches, amended poor soil, and replanted where necessary, actions that served as both practical therapy and powerful metaphor. The deepest lesson emerged gradually through countless conversations, therapy sessions, and quiet moments of reflection, discerning the crucial difference between love that honors and love that controls. Jackson had convinced himself his actions represented care when they actually reflected ownership. Understanding this distinction helped me establish healthier boundaries, not just with him but in all relationships. Love without respect isn't actually love. I told my book club during a particularly thoughtful discussion, it's possession dressed in concern's clothing. That evening, after everyone left, I stood in my kitchen, hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea, looking out at the garden Frank and I had planted decades earlier. The Japanese maple we'd added on our 30th anniversary had weathered storms, disease, and neglect during difficult periods, yet continued growing, its form altered but its essence intact. In that moment of quiet reflection, I recognized the peace I had finally reclaimed. Not perfect, not unmarked by trauma, but authentically mine. The journey from betrayal to empowerment had transformed me in ways I never would have chosen but now wouldn't trade. Have you ever had someone try to control your life for your own good? The line between caring and controlling can be painfully thin. Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others recognize the warning signs of control disguised as protection. Remember, independence isn't about age, it's about the fundamental right to direct your own life. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you always maintain the courage to protect your autonomy regardless of your age.